Hey, we're almost to that century mark of stories inside the man cave. I cannot believe this. This is episode 98. And, a full circle of life with some of our guests. We've had some great guests, some great stories, a lot of humor, and we've learned from people who have delivered a ton of wisdom from their mistakes, and they've offered great advice from many walks of life. But this guy right here, dating back to my days in East Texas, we're both Stephen F. Austin alumni. He doesn't know this, but he was a mentor to me indirectly. But he's also a guy who has kind of started the trend of sports talk radio in the state of Texas. Episode 98 with the David Smoak, who's now in Waco, Texas. Let's ride.
Wake your ass up
or take a damn nap.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
It's time.
Sean, you were twerking. That's going to happen.
Murph, don't be a dick all your life.
It's one of the more fun podcasts I've ever done.
Hey, I tell you what, if you're not talking about sports in the man cave, I bet not say you not a bed.
That's it.
The Big 12 should be expanded before to bring more revenue into the conference. We also probably, I think most of us agree with that. If Baylor and Kansas had SEC offers on the table, they would take them just as eagerly as Texas and OU.
That is the David Smoak from Sikkim 365 in Waco. Dating that little scene from you, David, that was back when Texas and OU announced they were going to the SEC. And everything just kind of fell in place, just kind of conveniently. What was the feeling in Waco? Was there a lot of hatred that Texas and OU were leaving and taking their money with them?
Well, first of all, great to have you be a part of this, Sean. I love that background with Axum Jacks. I love that.
Axum, baby.
What Colby's tried to do, that football program. I'm still brokenhearted by the loss to Sam Houston State. Oh,
heartbreaking.
But you got to learn how to win, and he's getting them to do that. But yeah, no, there was some anger, and you know why. I mean, everyone knows the who is and who's not in the Big 12, and for the longest of time. And I think there was, some shock, and oh my God, here we go again, and yet I made that comment. If any of the other teams in the Big 12 had been offered by anybody else in another conference, as far as the Power Five, then it would have been really difficult for any of them to have said no to that, if they would have been invited, so to speak. But you know what? It's been amazing. It's been an unbelievable turnaround the last 3 months of the Big 12 with what Bob Bowlesby's been able to 100%. Get done and survive, and in some ways, I don't know about thriving yet because they don't know yet about the TV contract, but I think it's going to be a little bit better than what most people. There were thoughts. They're all done. They're going to be a part of a group of five, and they're all going to split up. And I think even the possibility that Texas and Oklahoma, maybe we're hoping that like Kansas would go here or West Virginia and it would implode, and then they wouldn't have to worry about any of the bylaws and all that. But, I mean, you look up, that was in late July. It was right after Big 12 Media Days. And we had interviewed Bob Bowlesby then, I was talking about, did you think that the conference or the college football expansion of the playoffs would slow down any of the future of any type of talk of realignment or expansion? And he goes, I think it pretty much all but ended it. Well, then wham, here he goes, wham. And I do think he was blindsided. Whether he should have known more, sure. But he got up off the canvas and he's tried to make this work. I think he's a man that's now probably more determined than ever before, because he was knocked down, and some people, he should be fired or he should be gone, or how the heck did he not know? Well, I don't think more than a handful of people knew, including those at Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC. So, yeah, that was, man, I tell you what it did, Sean. We have the show, Sikkim 365 Radio, which really is more than just about Baylor. It's about a lot of things. But we had a YouTube channel. And at the time, I think right when that happened, we had 2,600 subscribers. And I don't even know what that means. It's part of what we have. And now we're near 15,000. I mean, it exploded. That story, which, you never know how it affects what Baylor or Iowa State or TCU or Tech. our show, fortunately, with Craig and Paul, it exploded because we started having some ideas. We weren't like in panic mode, but it was tough. And we started having people watching us from around the country. West Virginia fans, like, what's going to happen?
Yes.
And then on top of that, then UCF, and then Memphis, and then Cincy, and then Houston, and Brigham Young. They all started to, for some reason, they trusted us for some of the news we were reporting. We were ahead of the curve a little bit on the post-Texas and Oklahoma leaving at some point. But it really, man, I'll tell you what, college football, we've seen this how many times? And there's going to be another one at some point. We just don't know when.
It has been the first stone dropped was back when I was in OKC when Colorado left, A&M left, and it has been, we knew that day was coming. We knew it was coming. But on a much different level, you kind of saw what sports talk radio in the state of Texas from a digital point of view was going to be like way before anyone knew that it would be conceptualized as today. Early 2000s, turn of the century, this guy, I'm trying to get my directions, Dave, right here. This guy started a website called Smoaky.com, spelled like his last name. I want to call you the pioneer of sports talk radio in the state of Texas. And you did TV work, kind of a mentor to me in college, and also Brian Mays here in Austin. You developed the business model. Now, how was it luck, or did you see an opportunity in East Texas and covering the Cowboys to capitalize on? Because now everyone has a podcast.
Yeah.
And sports talk radio has blossomed.
Well, first of all, on the radio part, I remember sitting down with Norm Hitzkiss and Randy Galloway. Those guys are the beacons, Brad Sham, and what they did. And thank you very much. But so I'm sitting there in Tyler, and I covered what was then at 5A, I guess was at the time. Right. It's not 6A, but it's 6A now. And you had this district with Longview and Lufkin and Marshall and Texas High and obviously Lee and John Tyler, and their names have changed, and Nacogdoches. And it was, to me, what I tried to do was make them our Big 12, or I guess even before the Big 12, it was the Southwest Conference or the SEC, whatever. And there was a guy, and I always wish I could remember his name, but he had a message board out of Marshall. And I saw it was about Marshall Mavericks football. And of course, they had the great run with Dennis Parker in the late 80s, won it all in 1990. And so I got on the message board back and forth with fans. And so there's a guy working for me at the radio station, working with me, David Morgan, who was a technical guy. He's the one that was way ahead of all of this. I scripting websites and all that. He said, you could kill with this. And I was like, what do you mean? You could have your own website. Call it your own name. And so I felt like, well, I don't want to ruin somebody else's opportunity because this guy had a following. And so he said, let me try some things. And we tried it, and it just exploded. I didn't want it to just be a message board. I wanted it to be an historical perspective of like high school teams that I covered, and now added a chunk when I moved to Waco in 2010. But David Morgan, that's his name. He's an amazing guy. And I never realized. I'll tell you what, I was in radio and television. Of course, I've done that now for almost 40 years. And Sean, anytime somebody would come up to me and say hi to me, or if somebody introduced me, they would introduce me. He's the owner of Smoaky.com. It wasn't KTBB Radio. It wasn't Channel 7. It wasn't whatever else. It wasn't anything. And I was like, I never had any clue. Never understood it. And then we built it. And it was, I remember my family, like hours upon hours, adding historical data. We have an historical section of 200 and some schools. It was like, oh my gosh. And it's still alive. It's still beating. It's 20 years, I guess it is, right? Almost 20 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think that way. 2 decades have passed.
And then we incorporated the Cowboys coverage because we covered the Cowboys a lot with the radio station. And then we incorporated that with the website, Smoaky.com/Dallas Cowboys. And we sold the sponsorship and we put content on it. It was something I never could have imagined, ever. And then, then all of a sudden, a year and a half ago, COVID's coming through the state of Texas. I'm running a radio station, at least a program director, and the owner who had really been kind of wobbling for a long, long time about wanting to get rid of people. And, it was every day. It was like one day everything's good, the next day. And I mean, he writes the checks, he pays the bills, but it was really wearing us out. And then one day he told me 4 people have to go. This was March the 17th. He had told me that a week or so before that, but he had done that before. Yeah. March the 17th, that night, he sits down with me and he chews me. He goes, you're getting rid of 4 people. He wanted to fire my son, my co-host of 10 years, Paul Catalina, and the producer of the show. Well, I mean, I could see what's going on here. And he was worried about COVID. A lot of people were, but it really had not yet exploded into Texas yet. It was here. But 3 days later, Sikkim365.com, which is a really nice website, covers Baylor. They've only been in existence for like 4 years at the time. Yeah. They call me, hey, we want to talk with you. And I'm like, there's nothing you can do. I'm thinking, okay, where am I moving? Am I going back East Texas? Am I changing my career? 3 days later, we do a conference call. We come to some figures the next day, and we've been doing this show now since April 6th of 2020. It was from scratch. And we have this beautiful studio, and you're doing what you're doing. We have podcasts. Technology is a crazy thing, man, and what it allows us to do, and keep doing what we love to do.
Yeah, and that's it. I changed careers. I'm in pharmaceutical sales now. Jumped out after 21 years, and then 2 of my friends, and it ended up being 3. I just had this vision, and it was first an audio, and it launched at the end of the first month of the lockdown. We said, all right, let's do it. And now we have sponsors, a couple, but you're always got to evolve. And that's the thing that I've watched from you. It was, and in the TV business and radio, the evolution was constant. So change is nothing to us.
No.
And that's when you're continuing to change.
Yeah, and I'm a military brat. My dad was a Naval Academy graduate, and we moved all over the country, all over the world. We lived in Guam and Texas, and we lived in Japan, and we lived in Virginia. And Nebraska was where I was born. Everyone always how are you a Nebraska fan? And you might see a couple of helmets. And one of them's Earl Campbell, by the way, in the background with the Love You Blue. I mean, there it is. Leaving every 3 or 4 years was part of my life. And so change, a lot of people don't like change. Some people get used to it. You'd rather have a comfort zone, but I kind of like to build things. I like to maybe renovate things. No different than the coaching business. Some coaches are really good about getting to a place at the perfect time. And then some are really good about taking a bad situation like Matt Rule did in 2017 or like Bill Snyder at Kansas State. I'm not trying to compare myself. I'm just talking about people are builders, and some that are better about going into a place, finding weaknesses if there are any, and making something better and giving them new ideas. And that's what it's all about. This thing with what we've done now with this radio show, we have a studio that's better than some of the TV stations I worked at.
And that's what say that.
And the thing about TV, and you felt this as well, and I followed you all your career as well, is that and again, I'm old. 1981, I debuted 40 years ago on KTRE in Lufkin.
Wow.
And I had, 3.5, 4 minutes for a sportscast. Now, you may not even have a sportscast. You might get a minute. How you doing, Sean? Texas won. Yeah.
Bye.
Boom. Yeah, a Vosot video, and then a soundbite into Steve Sarkisian talking about the psyche of the Texas football team. That's all you have time for. There's no chance for human interest stories. There's no chance to cover an area like you want. And a lot of it is because sports is so much available at other outlets like the one you're doing and like the one that we're doing as well.
If there was a man cave story that encapsulates, well, maybe it was at Cowboys training camp. Maybe it was covering Longview, John Tyler, Lufkin. Maybe it was with your family, because I know you and your son, Craig Smoak, have had some humorous good times together at broadcasting.
Oh, yeah.
Seeing you guys at Big 12 Media Days. I do miss that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a 1A and 1B, Jim Saxton State Farm Insurance Man Cave stories for the David Smoak.
I'm going to start with one that's not mine, if it's okay.
Hey, that's
fun. And I'm not dropping names. And being from a long, long time living and working in Tyler, Earl Campbell, mm-hmm. He has a beautiful home now in the southern part. I guess it's southeast or southwest Austin where he lives. It's up Barton Creek area. It's gorgeous. And I was able to visit him because he has the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award, and Cindy runs that award, and I'm a part of it. Craig finds the nominees every week. But we visited him one time, and he was sitting in his recliner. And I promise you, and I'm not dropping names because everyone would love to know Earl, and a lot of people do. He's the nicest. He's the only player who's probably ever played at Texas that A&M fans love. You know, I mean, I've never heard a negative thing about him, ever. He's as good as it could humanly be possible for a guy who he is. And I've been lucky enough to get to know him and seen him reinvent himself with the sausage business, but also with all the things he does with UT and the Hall of Fame. So we go visit him to drop off this Hall of Fame ring for the East Texas Coaches Association, where he's inducted, and it's this beautiful, beautiful ring. And not like he hasn't been inducted into every Hall of Fame known to man, but it was for his backyard in East Texas. It's a banquet every year they have in Texarkana. Walk in, go back to where he is, and he has a wall. He's got this recliner, and the backdrop is a beautiful part of the country. He lives up kind of on the hills and all that. And he's got a wall where there are, I don't know if it's, I may be wrong, 6, 8, 10 flat screens. Nice flat screens. I mean, some of them may be bigger than others. And then, Sean, all the way around the wall are autographed jerseys of not only what he has done, but others who have autographed jerseys that he's put up on the wall. It is, I wish, and like if I was doing a TV, if I did a feature on him, I would go feature Earl Campbell's Man Cave. It is unbelievable. And, you know, he's very private. At the same time, he's available. He's very accessible. But it's insane. I sat there, he and I were watching whatever it was at the time, and I just sat there and I go, if I ever had this, if I was ever lucky enough for either someone to buy it for me or to give it to me, I'd never leave. He goes, you think I want to leave? And of course, so okay, I can only paint the picture. It's unbelievable. So we were going to do an auction, and he said, hey, go around the corner. It's towards their kitchen. Go around the corner. There's a cabinet. And I'll sign, I'm going to sign a jersey for you to have an auction for. I do this banquet every year for academic all-star high school student athletes. And so he goes, go around and I open up this cabinet. I hope he's okay with me. It's like a stack of like jerseys that were like towels. I get a jersey. I walk around. He signs it. I take it back. We've auctioned it off for a couple $1,000s, you know, maybe $2,500. He is the most giving person. And so that's a man. Now, as far as me personally, I kind of like what I have here, the condo here in Waco off the lake. But when I had the house in Tyler, my man cave was out back. I had a pool out back, beautiful, beautiful backyard. And then there was like a deck that was already built when we got there. And I turned that outside every Saturday afternoon. I had a grill. I had a smoker. I was able to get cable out to the back of the deck. I had a flat screen, and then I would bring one out, a big flat screen. This is outside. I'd kick my feet up on this, like this little bar that I had. I had a little mini refrigerator. I was in heaven. It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Man, that is life. I'm envisioning now a cigar. Was there a humidor?
Oh yeah. I smoked cigars. And Tobacco Junction was. Hope you don't mind me dropping their name.
No.
They would set me up because I did endorsements for them. Smoke cigars. I'd have a drink, and I'll say this because I know you got a lot of guys from Austin that watch you, and a lot of people are Horns fans. Every time Nebraska played Texas, it was going to be a bad ending because from the first Big 12 championship game, I'll never forget. And then every game after that, except one in '99, Nebraska drilled him in the Big 12 title game. But, like, I love Aaron Ross. Aaron Ross, I believe, is the one that up in Lincoln, it's snowing. Nebraska's beating Texas, and they shouldn't have been. This is like one of the times in the early years, Nebraska was the favorite, and Texas found a way. It's snowing. Nebraska, I think it was Bill Callahan was the head coach. And they're beating Texas, and they shouldn't be. And all they have to do is pick up a first down. They run a little play out in the flat. Guy catches it. He's going down, and Aaron Ross jostles the ball loose. Texas recovers. Of course, they drive down the field. Bop, 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 bop. Kick the field goal. So if I was watching Nebraska, Texas, I'd drink a lot of Crown Royal. And wish I had more than a cigar sometimes that I was smoking too, because it was always every time it was a bad ending.
And that kicker was from my high school, Anderson High School. I remember now.
Oh, my God.
And I don't know why I cannot think of the name.
Well, it was in the snow, and it was in Lincoln. And then, of course, we all know what happened in the 2009 Big 12 championship game, and Dominic Sue almost killed Colt McCoy. It's another game. Another game. They were good. They were pretty good defensively. Pelini had a good team, but that was the team that Texas had that felt like Colt McCoy doesn't get injured, they may win a national title. They almost didn't make it there, but sure enough, kickoff, face mask, Shipley over the middle for 20. God, field goals, no 1 second left. And it was the right thing. If you think about, if Colt McCoy would have thrown that ball another yard in the air or left of the railing, game's over. Yeah. But no, it was just another way to reach inside my heart and just rip it right out. Rip it right out.
Oh my God.
But I used to sit out there and watch football all day long. I didn't have to cover a college team back then because I was, there was no college. We'd go cover every once in a while high school kids out of East Texas that played somewhere. I'd sit out there for hours, and just, it was nothing better.
That was Tyler, and that part of East Texas is a very beautiful part of the state where you were, and Lake Wake. Okay, so I have clients near where you are, your condo.
Right.
I had no idea there was a lake in Waco until I started this career.
Really?
I had no idea.
I had been to Waco many, many, many times to cover either every once in a while I'd go watch if Nebraska was playing Baylor at Floyd Casey. I'd been, probably covered or went and watched 4 or 5 of those games. I'd been there to cover basketball games at the Farrell Center for high school regional games. I'd been to the new football stadium at Waco ISD and Floyd Casey for high school playoff games, state championship games, back when Dangerfield was dominating high school football, way back. And when I moved here in June of 2010, they set me up at the Hilton for like 4 to 6 weeks. And finally the owner goes, "Hey, you're getting a little bit used to that. You need to go find a place." So I didn't know where I was going to go. And then all of a sudden, somebody told me, go down Valley Mills and keep driving. It's going to hit it'll go down the hill and you'll see the lake. And I'm sure most places have some sort of a pond or a lake. And it's a big lake. I mean, it's not like Lake Palestine. It's a big lake. So I start driving down this road and I find this place. Initially, when I first moved here, it was an apartment complex. It was across from the lake, up on a hill a little bit. I kind of liked it. It was real peaceful. Mm-hmm. And then about, 2 or 3 years later, guy tells me he has a condo that's off the lake. And I've been here since 2013. It's so quiet. But there's some nice places here off the lake, no question.
And that, I know Chip and Joanna's inspired quite a bit, but I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to admit it. People don't believe me, and people judge Waco for what you see on the east and west of I-35. There are some scenic, livable places, desirable places in Waco, Texas. It's more than meets the eye.
Well, it's come a long way, Sean, and I didn't know. And I'm telling you right now, we know the stories that have happened. We know all about some of the things. When I moved here, when I was the first time I covered a Super Bowl, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's where that happened," and the thing in Branch Davidians, and then then all of a sudden here comes RG3, and here comes Brittany Griner, and here comes this great run in football, and there's been some other dark days as well. This place, downtown Waco, they have $1 million homes here. They have a beautiful country club in Ridgewood that's spectacular. It's kind of a shorter course, but it's hard. They have beautiful places and outside in areas outside of Waco. Where I live, it's very nice. I'm not, it just is. It's a very quiet, comfortable place, peaceful. And, but what they've done downtown with what Magnolia and the Silos have done, Baylor getting better and better in sports helped build some things around the campus because people wanted to be attached to it, even with all the negative at times. But what they've done downtown, they've got a place, a distillery, Balcones is a whiskey place. There are reasons. This is a very popular tourist attraction site. And like one day, I don't even know where I was. I was standing in line. Maybe, I don't know where. Maybe I was like, where are you from? California. I go, what are you doing here? Silos. They come to see all over the country. They're flocking. Thousands and thousands of people. And there's events here just like there are. It's not a huge city, just over 10, 20, 30,000. But I got to tell you, the difference since I moved here in 2010, and I saw it pretty quickly, but now we're at a studio on 101 Elm on the corner of MLK and Elm that used to be a bad place to be. There were bad, and that's how much there are places that are being gobbled up because everyone's gobbling up land, leveling the land, building hotels. There used to be hardly any hotels. Now there's dozens of them. Where we are used to be a very bad place, and they've cleaned it up. And I think it's great for the people in that area, in that community, and it's great for Waco, no question.
Oh, it's a great place, and there are some places downtown that are, I will recommend. If I could get them as a sponsor, I will gladly promote them.
There used to be like you'd ask when I first got here, you got to go to X, Y, and Z to eat. Now there are several. Like the X, Y, and Z are still good, but now there's so many different. Like I love Cajun food. Yeah. I love cooking it. I learned from a couple of guys Scott and Tim helped me learn how to make like real jambalaya and whatever etouffee. And there was one place, and it's right on the river. It's Buzzard Billy's, and right across from the stadium, the new stadium, like right there off of 35. And now there's like 12 or 13 places that do that because it's growing. You gotta have places to feed people. It's been really impressive. I thought I was going to be here a year or two, and here I am. 11 plus years later.
That's what I said about Oklahoma City. I thought I was going to be there 2 years, ended up 6. Another place that is a hidden jewel, depending on if you give it a chance or not.
Yeah, no, yeah. You know what? My favorite place to go in Oklahoma City when I go cover like the men's NCAA or women's regionals and the NCAA tournament, and sometimes the Big 12 women's tournament has been there, although they're moving back to Kansas City. Mickey Mantle's Steakhouse. I love that place because, Sean, I could walk in there and you could sit down, you have a drink, they have this fantastic menu, the big old bone-in ribeyes, whatever you want, and you can sit there and light up a cigar right there at the bar. And
it should be.
Watch whatever you want. Like the NCAA tournament's going on, enjoy your meal, smoke a cigar, and everyone else is, so you're not like bothering anybody. They can always go to a different part of the restaurant. I miss going there. I love going to that place. One of my favorite places.
Best day before Big 12 baseball tournament was the luncheon there, and go over there, grab a cocktail, just walk across the street to the stadium. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That is a really unique 5 or 6, 8 block area right there, what they've done in Oklahoma City. It's really cool.
It really is. Hey, when we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we're going to talk about, you mentioned Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorn psyche, because they're headed to your neck of the woods, which it's not that I ever doubted Baylor. It's the position they're in. I think they're ahead of schedule. And we'll talk about that because David Smoak is the expert on the Bears. And David Aranda, we know him. He's a spawn of the guy who is about to not be the head coach at LSU. Segment 2 on the way. On the way here in Stories Inside the Man Cave. For all of your insurance needs, look no further than our primary sponsor, Jim Saxton State Farm Insurance Agency. The ATX OG has been insuring Austin for over 3 decades. And get this, Jim Saxton is a Longhorn legacy. He is the son of the late, great James Saxton, who was a Heisman finalist. Be sure to give him a call, or better yet, visit his website, saxtoninsurance.com, and tell him that the Stories Inside the Man Cave Boys recommended you. David Smoak, 365 in Waco. He is one of the pioneers of sports talk radio, and was ahead of the curve, as you heard the story, as far as the digital space back in East Texas. And Brian May is a good friend of mine, who is the main anchor at KVU now, where I used to be employed as a sports anchor and reporter. We all watched him and emulated and learned and saw how he did things. But now he is an expert on Baylor, Bear, and Lady Bear athletics. Texas, the Longhorns playing in Waco, a place that has not been kind to Texas in recent history. But Charlie Strong beat him.
Yep.
Steve Sarkisian and his Longhorns get their head right and jump on a run, so to speak.
You know, I'm still trying to figure out that second half of that Texas OU game. I'm covering the game at McLean Stadium, and I'm keeping up with it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, because Lincoln Riley kept kicking field goals, and I was like, but he just kept chipping away, like he was confident at some point, 3, 6, 9 points, because you could start chasing fourth downs and not getting anything. It's like chasing a 2-point conversion. If you miss an extra point, and the next thing you know, you've lost 3 to 5 points. But that's another thing. That's still unbelievable how that went down. And then they did it again, basically, with the fourth quarter against Oklahoma State. A little bit less dramatic. The Charlie Strong game, Sean. Texas they're dead in the water. That's it for him.
That was a bowl game.
Yeah. And I'll never forget. That was the year, I think, that 2015 Baylor team was good enough to play at the highest of levels. That's the team that had Seth Russell went out.
Yeah.
Then Jarrett Stidham played pretty well, and then he went out. Then they had Chris Johnson came in, and they helped him. I guess it was at Oklahoma State when Stidham hurt himself, got maybe an ankle or a foot. That team was decimated. They had Lynx Hawthorne, who was playing quarterback for them. And we had Bryce Petty on the show. I guess it was, we had Bryce on. We had somebody else on the show that was a part of that team. Texas came in. They had no right winning that game. They knocked Chris Johnson out of the game early. He fumbled. He had a concussion. Now they're down to a wide receiver who was a hell of a high school player. And, Texas, I think Buechele had a pretty big, Tyrone Swift. But they were winning, and they were in control of the game. And then Baylor went in at halftime and basically just started making up. Yeah. They started running basically the Wildcat with Johnny Jefferson. And if you'll recall, at the end of that game, he broke a long run out towards midfield and fumbled. They're going to win the game. Now, they didn't. It happened. It happened to be they just got too far behind. They started doing that too late. Do you know that the bowl game they played North Carolina, they ran that basically one back. Johnny Jefferson had 299 yards rushing in that game. I don't even know if they threw a pass. They didn't have to. They crushed not Mac Brown. They crushed Larry Fedora, who then eventually was that offensive coordinator last year.
He's from Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. His brother is the coach at A&M Consolidated, that won a couple of state titles at Navasota. But that Charlie, I'll never forget. I knew Jeff Traylor. He's a very good friend of mine. And, of course, his name's in all the news about Tech or whoever else. Having a great year. He was on that staff. Yes, he was on that staff. And I remember walking over to the buses as the UT buses they just won this game. But I looked in the front of one of the buses, and it was Charlie Strong. And he's a great man. He looked like he had just lost a family member. They had just beaten Baylor, and he knew. Whether he was like sick to his stomach because they couldn't play like that week in and week out, or he knew it didn't matter. It didn't matter. He was on his. They had lost to Kansas that year, whatever that year was. But that was a crazy great win for Texas because no one saw that coming. But they just caught him at just the right time.
They did. And I remember it was, I think, Shane Bouchel to Caleb Blewett down the sidelines. And then
they got the fumble. They had the field position. They played almost the entire first half, even really for a while, in Baylor territory. And Baylor just, with this explosive offense that could just put up silly numbers and yards, they just didn't have anything. And they finally just said, what the heck? Snap it to Johnny and let him run behind that big offensive line. And they almost came back and won the game. They were really good that year. But when they lost Seth Russell, that was a big deal, obviously.
Now, David Aranda, part of that LSU staff with Ed Orgeron, he has done a pretty magnificent job. I have not met Aranda yet. He has this persona that he's not soft-spoken, but I haven't seen the full personality of Aranda. Is it an accurate read on my part?
No,
he's very professional.
I got to meet him the day he was introduced, and it was at McLean Stadium. They introduced him, and I was able to sit down and do a one-on-one that they set up with me and Coach Aranda. And I knew about him. I tried to do all the research I could. Very, very, very soft-spoken. And what I mean by that, now at press conferences on press Mondays,
yes,
I used to sit like on the third row, and I started struggling. First of all, on occasion, I don't know if I hear very well anyway, but or maybe selective hearing. I started moving up to the first and second row. I couldn't. He's so soft-spoken, really, and this man, he can sit. I asked him a question about attention. We know his name has been brought up, and he gave an answer about that earlier in the press conference. And I asked him, I said, you seem to be a selfless guy. He does. He seems to be like, he doesn't want any attention. But everybody has an ego. Everybody does. And I asked him, I said, was there ever a time in your career when you had to battle that? Because he seemed like he has none. And he's really kind of said no, because if things are going well, you don't have time. It was deep. I mean, it's like I asked him about the tension that he's ever gotten. Does it make him uncomfortable? And he started telling me how they built the Alaskan pipeline. I mean, no, he didn't, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I've said this on the show. There are times I'm not smart enough to listen to him. I don't mind admitting that. I mean, I went to Tyler Junior College in Stephen F. Austin. Now, SFA, we know we're the Stanford of the South. I understand that.
We do.
Yes. But Axum Jacks. But I did go JUCO. There's a reason for that. And so he is really, Craig will look at me and go, Dad, stop. I don't understand him sometimes because he can, I don't know if it was Bruce Feldman or it was Pete Thamel. It was Pete Thamel. He was at the press conference after they had beaten either West Virginia or Brigham Young, and he's talked about some of the stuff that Aranda starts talking about. You got to pay attention. I mean, you've got to pay. Like Matt Rule would demand a room, right? You've got to pay attention. Not that I wasn't before, but with Dave Aranda, I mean, I go in and interview him every other Monday. I get a chance to sit in his office one-on-one for 12 to 15 minutes. And if I'm not ready, like I could go in there without anything with Matt Rule and go 30 minutes with him. But with Dave Aranda, I've got to be like ready. I've got to think about it for a couple of days before I walk in there because he's deep, cerebral, philosophical. He's a philosophy major, I think is what psychology major. And he's done a hell of a job. Last year was an abomination. Right. Offense was terrible. COVID, no spring drills. A lot of people, even the veteran teams, had trouble with it. He needs to be in front of his players. All coaches do. But he's had a chance to finally do that. They had spring drills. He made, for a guy that seemed like he's so nice, and he is, he changed offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches in a heartbeat. As soon as that season was over and they got smoked by Oklahoma State, there was no delay. I mean, 2 days later, I think it was, they're gone. Or I think it was like 2 or 3 days later, they're gone. And these are two guys with proud resumes. I know Wickline was at Texas at one point, Oklahoma State, elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But Larry Fedora, I mean, he's got a hell of a resume. Gone. And he also got rid of an assistant that was on staff at LSU that was an analyst, gone. And that takes, it's kind of like a quiet assassin of what he did. He knew what he needed to do, and he's a great guy, nice guy, but he did it. And I think it says quite a bit that he was not afraid to make that decision.
I respect that 100% because there is a lot of loyalty, and that's what kind of killed Charlie here. A lot of loyalty. Loyalty, unfortunately, is not overly prevalent anymore, especially in this industry, the coaching industry, that is. And I think we've got another one that's like Aranda, that being Sarkisian. Both guys proving themselves. Both guys have skins on the wall. And I think the cerebral part and being able to communicate to kids exists for both. I mean, here's Sark right here talking about, I believe he was asked the mind piece, how do you worry about the psychological piece of actually finishing games? And I'll tell you what I think, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to say.
At the end of the day, we want to put ourselves in position to where we do it well, so well that, you want to perform in the moment when that time comes, and that comes from our preparation and our repetition. But we shouldn't worry about the moment. We should always fall back into this is what we do and this is how we do it on a consistent basis. So yes, ultimately, it's going to come down to doing it in game, but we shouldn't put that is the test, when in reality, we should be testing ourselves every day to see how far we can take this idea of doing right and doing the next right thing for the next play, and one play at a time mentality, which I know some of that is coach speak. I understand that, and we hear that a lot, one play at a time and all that kind of stuff. But for us, that it's really true that when we focus on that next play and we give that play the credit it deserves and the life of its own that it possesses, generally we're better.
All right, that soundbite was a little too long to be aired on a normal local television sportscast. That would have been trimmed by 40 seconds.
Yeah, you may not have had time for it. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Smoaky, you've heard and been around all the cliches probably 500 times or more. Is that genuine? I feel like Sark is genuine, but will never publicly criticize his players, nor should he.
I got to tell you this. I guess since 2010, when I started covering a Big 12 team in Baylor, I've been to media days over and over again. I was fortunate to always have a chance to visit with Mac Brown.
Wow.
A lot of it was because I initially, when he got the job, I was in Tyler, and he wanted to recruit Tyler, and he knew if he came on my show that I'm not saying that would make a difference, but he was going to get some attention. And it was great for us. I never, ever got anywhere near getting anything from Tom Herman, which is not a shocker. I would always send in, hey, no. I had Sarkisian with Craig and Paul at Big 12 Media Days this year. I like him a lot. I'm telling you, I do. I do. He's very genuine. I know you can kind of sometimes call the BS. You can see that stinks. There's a lot of cliches in there. That's the one soundbite that I think we might have played as well. There was a little bit else. One of the other things he mentioned, Sean, I believe, was if you could do this and have success in the first quarter, why can't you do that no matter the score or the moment in the third quarter? And he's talking about repetition. If we can run whatever, a stretch run with Bijan, the defense might make adjustments, but we got to just do it where we're not looking at the scoreboard. We're not looking at the time. We're not looking at the moment, or we're not looking at the quarter or whatever. It's exactly the same soundbite we ran earlier this week. Yeah, and he seems to be very genuine. I like him a lot. We walked away from that. I told him, I said, man, I appreciate the time. And John Bianco set that up. We appreciate that. And like Dave Aranda, who is this really nice guy, right? He's on occasion taken a couple of little jabs and kind of questioned a player or two with what their motivation, maturity, got to grow up. they got this big, huge defensive, this nose tackle, Siaka Ika. Apu's his nickname. He's a transfer from LSU, so Aranda knew him. 350-pound, he's an animal. And, all this hype we heard about him. And they had Bravion Roy on that 2019 team who's now playing in the NFL, who's from Spring High School. God, he was good as a nose tackle for Baylor in that defense at Rule, and Phil Snow ran. But we heard all this hype all throughout the offseason about Siaka, and he hadn't made a play. It seemed like, where is he? Maybe he's a little bit too big. Maybe, because it's hard to be 350. I used to weigh 280, and it's hard to walk to the car sometimes or walk up a flight of stairs. And I asked him a couple of weeks in a row about Apu, and he was pretty honest about it. He's just missed it a little bit here. And then he got himself sideways in something, nothing bad, nothing criminal, but he got himself in the wrong place, and they sat him down. They suspended him for a week. And now he's making plays now. I'm not saying he's an All-American, but he batted down a pass against Iowa State that led to a pick. He made a couple of disruptive plays in their win against West Virginia and Brigham Young. Aranda he's not afraid to kind of, now he would never criticize, like all of last year, the offense was terrible. It was the worst I've ever seen. They had Abram Smith, the converted linebacker who was an all-state running back at Abilene, has as many yards already this year as they had all of last year rushing the football. Charlie Brewer's like their leading rusher, and he had like 200 yards. And that's after about, 3 or 4 sacks a game. Charlie didn't play well last year, but he didn't have any time. They had no running game. Aranda never said a negative word. Plus, he didn't quite know his guys yet. He's learning that. And but I've seen a little bit more of an edge. He said this, I think, maybe after they'd beaten Texas State, but they struggled, which they shouldn't have done. He was talking about, people's clocks are ticking. There's some guys whose clocks are ticking. This is it.
No, I like that.
Yeah, I do. And I can't remember. It might have been, after Oklahoma State. I asked him either in the presser or in an interview with him. I asked him about, they had a couple of bad penalties at the end of the game that really cost them. They would have gotten the ball back, or at least Oklahoma State would have kicked a field goal, not scored a touchdown. And I said, are you ready to take off the diapers? It's time for some of these guys to grow up, because they did not play well in the first half. Now, Oklahoma State, as you know, is very good. And he basically admitted, it's time for these guys. He was mad. He was in the post game. He was mad. Now, he's not going to cuss and scream and yell and all that, but he was mad. He was fed up. He drew a line in the sand. Now, I don't know what they're going to do Saturday against Texas. I don't know what they're going to do the rest of the year, but they're bowl eligible, and they have bigger plans than that, bigger goals than that. He put his foot down and said enough is enough and made his team accountable. And I kind of like that. You can do that without saying much and without criticizing the player. But I think what Sark is saying is we've got to learn how to play 4 quarters. We've got to grow up and finish. And imagine where they would be had they finished against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. They'd be right in the middle of this whole conversation.
It's amazing, and I've got to answer real quick because my ADHD is about to take over. Because there's squirrels everywhere.
I know.
Well, number one, you mentioned your 288 days. I had 3 years of being fat while I was in Oklahoma City. Before I came to Austin, I started trimming down, so I understand it was exhausting walking places. My knees loved me then.
Yeah.
Number two. Remind me to tell you about unless you probably heard about the infamous, legendary one-on-one or Tom Herman meeting and behind closed doors. You heard about that?
With the media?
It was about 14 of us.
Is that the time when he said that if I find out you're texting a parent of the team or a parent of a player or something, was it kind of a threatening type thing?
Yeah, and we'll find you. We'll find the person, and we'll get the person who dripped the information out, leaked it, fired. And we were like, this isn't Houston, buddy.
No, it's Columbus was pretty tough, but they were winning with Urban. But yeah, that's not, Matt Rule had a pretty tight ship. His NFL background, it's a completely different staff from the one that was gone. Sorry about that. And so That was my reminder to probably take my Metamucil or whatever. But you know what I have? I have now, and anyone that knows me, I have reminders in my phone, sticky notes on my windshield or my rear view mirror. It's bad. I mean, it's talk about attention. I could get in the car. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a calendar that pops up. I have sticky notes on sticky notes. I have behind me all this stuff. I don't even know if I even look at it, but if it's there, I might. It's so bad to be an attention deficit guy. I mean, or anyone. It's awful. I can get in the car to drive down to the corner store to get like something and be there, buy something, drive back to the condo, and I didn't get what I went there to get. Are you like? I mean,
I have been there.
Oh, jeez, it's like it's horrible.
A trait.
It's
I think of Stephen F. Austin graduates.
Yeah, no, and you got because we're so smart. We're smarter than we should be, and we're outthinking ourselves.
That is it.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
But
hey,
but
this I just
I heard about that meeting. I think maybe a couple of the guys, three or five others in the Austin media told me about that. I was like, oh man, he's setting himself up. He better win. If you're gonna be a blank whatever, you better win. And he seemed like he was okay for a while. Yeah,
came close.
Yeah,
came close. As for Saturday, I just think if Texas can play 4 quarters and jump out to an early lead, but play every aspect of the game, it'll be a touchdown game for Texas. But I do think Baylor is as advertised. They are who they are. But Texas is who they are right now. Let's not get that confused. They are a 4-3 club. They are who their record says.
What did Bill Parcells used to say? You are who your record says you are. Even if you might be 6-1, or you could be lucky you're 6-1, you should be 4-3. You are who your record says you are. And, this game, both teams love to run the ball. We know how great Bijan is. I mean, it's amazing that Oklahoma game, that was a Heisman moment on that cross of field, stiff arm. And then Kennedy Brooks ends up outshining. Kennedy Brooks takes over the game. And on top of that, Caleb Williams. Whoever can establish the running game, obviously, both teams love to run the ball. Casey Thompson can throw it around, so can Gary Bohannon. Baylor has been able to run the ball on pretty much everybody but Oklahoma State. That was tough, and we know how good their defense is. They beat up Baylor in that game in the first half especially. Both teams have dynamic kick and punt returners that are capable of taking on any kick 85 or 100 yards, right? So, the thing about Texas, just watching them, and I have not sat down and watched an entire game. I'm not an X's and O's analyst, but if they seem to, like, when they start getting pushed around, it's almost like, oh God, here we go again, right? And they got to learn how to shut that down. Baylor has been surprising to me. I thought, hey, listen, you walk before you run. Get back to a bowl game. Get to 6 or 7 wins. If they end up with 6 or 7 wins now, it's going to be a disappointing year because that means you're about to have a free fall, and I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either. And I like also the fact that Texas they're still in control. They win this game. OSU will probably – Bedlam is going to decide something, one of those positions in the Big 12 championship. But you got Baylor, Iowa State. I love Matt Campbell. Love what he's done.
Yeah.
You got all those teams. Texas right there with 2 losses in the Big 12. They have this gauntlet of teams right here that they can beat. If they can go on a run here, they can get into that Big 12 championship.
Yeah, the thing is they still have to play Iowa State, and here we come. This is what they do. Matt Campbell has a hickey or 2 early in the year. Oklahoma did that for a long time. They'd lose a game. They might even lose to Oklahoma that one year, and then they ran the table, came back and beat them with Kyler Murray. Oklahoma still has to play Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Baylor. Again, Baylor's kind of all of a sudden become a fly in the ointment for some people because they weren't expected to be a part of this conversation. Maybe you thought it was TCU. Well, we know that they're struggling. Although Gary Patterson would give up a body part to be able to beat Texas or Baylor. I mean, he would. He's kind of starting to feel a little bit of that heat because of what, in that Texas game, they muffed the punt. They had a couple of chances in that game, but UT was able to kind of separate. I think, UT, it's like you expect him to go on a run. You expect him to win, rip off. Mac Brown had to do that a couple of times because they would always lose to Oklahoma almost every year for the first 5 or 6 years or so. In 98. But then they would get better and better and better and better. That was their MO. Lose to Oklahoma and then run the table and find it. But you didn't have the Big 12 championship game where they could play Oklahoma because they were in the same division. So I think Oklahoma State is tough and gritty, and Texas wishes that's probably what Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff wish he could say. Baylor's tough and gritty. They are. Now, I don't know if they want to get into a shootout. They scored 38 against Brigham Young, scored 45 against West Virginia, but I don't think that's their style. And there have been a couple of games where they have started slowly, and I know that UT has been able to find ways to start fast. They just can't finish. It's a great matchup. Do you know this, Sean? It might be the last time Texas ever plays in Waco. Ooh. Now I know there's going to be some sarcastic. Well, hell, they ended Mac Brown's career in Waco. They won a Big 12 title in 13 with that freezing day in 13. Beat him again. Killed him in 14, beat him up pretty good out in Austin, but they've won a few games here. The 2019, they twisted Sam Ehlinger around like a pretzel.
It was awful. It
was 24-10, but they got the field goal at the end of the half on that long run by Keontae Ingram. It was like, oh my God, 24-10. That was easily could have been 37-3. I mean, they dominated. Sam had no chance in that game. No one did. Texas didn't have any offense that game. But it could be because let's say they're leaving. We know that. Now, they say 2025 legally. They have to say that. Everyone's saying the right thing, right? But let's say it's the summer of 2023, which you hear that kind of that time. So this would be Waco this year, Austin next year, and done.
That's a great point.
111th meeting, I think, between the two.
It's an old rivalry.
And I know Texas has won like 75 or whatever percent, maybe more of the games. We know that. That's the way they are with almost everybody that they've played long term. But this could be the last time. And that's just a thought because of what could be coming up here in the next couple of years.
That brings back a lot of memories of Floyd Casey. I do recall the 1989 meeting, sitting there, hating life. It was 1988. 1988. It was warm, and then my buddies and I were in high school. A cold front blows through. Miserable. In the end zone with the scoreboard. It dropped from like 70 to 35.
Windy as hell, probably.
Windy as hell.
Yeah. The game in 2013, we're doing the pregame show, and we had to do our pregame.
Horrible.
We're the flagship station, but Baylor had a 2-hour pregame, and so we wanted to sell our own, and we did. So we were on even before them. So I think it was an 11 o'clock start. I don't know. There was Baylor wins, they win the Big 12 title. If Texas wins, I think there's like a 3-way tie, and maybe they win the Big 12 title. It was all the tents, like the alumni tents and where we were doing the show, we had those things you see on the back of like country clubs out near pools, those big, huge furnaces. Oh my God, it was freezing cold. That was a cold day in November, I guess it was. November or December in 2013. That was Mac Brown's last game as the head coach of the regular season.
It was. So you grew up in Nebraska. I experienced true winters in my first blizzard in Oklahoma City.
Or earlier this year in Texas.
Oh, that killed my truck battery.
Man, that was like once in a lifetime there.
I hope that's what it is.
No. Otherwise, it's not Texas.
Yeah, that's right. It would be. Yeah, no, that we don't want that a regular occurrence, and I don't want to change our name of our state.
No,
but
no.
I will say 2013, frozen fog in Waco.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced much colder temperatures, but that day was miserable on the field.
Yeah, I remember covering a Cotton Bowl. Boston College, Doug Flutie at the Cotton Bowl played Houston, University of Houston, Bill Yeoman. Flutie won the Heisman Trophy, and they played there, and it was so cold. I was shooting camera, had sidelines. I love shooting on the sideline. As you know, it's just that's where you want to be.
Right.
And it was so cold at halftime, I had to go into the like a little. It wasn't a very. It's like a janitor's closet to try to wipe off the inside because it was so cold. It was just like frosting up the cameras. Yeah. Oh, it was miserable.
Hey,
it was like a 4-hour drive back to Tyler to edit that in time for the 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Because
there was no computers. You didn't do things right there. You didn't have chips. You couldn't edit it on a laptop or whatever. We had to drive back. And back when you had those big tapes, those
3/4 inch.
Yeah, 3/4 inch tapes, and you had an edit machine. You pushed a button, click, click, click. No, you know I'm right. Oh my God! And I get out of TV full time. They start having these little beta things that are faster, and now you can edit it on your screen. You just
you get on your phone.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Hey man, tell me something good.
All right, wrapping things up with the Tell Me Something Good segment with the David Smoak, sponsored by Cosmic Coffee and Beer Garden, which I can officially announce now, Dave, is the official host and sponsor of my 30th high school reunion. As of today, we got it confirmed, delayed, COVID delayed. Next time you're in, they do have boozy coffee, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And regular Texas brewed, distilled, delightful drinks, if you will.
Yes.
I want to start this one off because I think you'll like it. The guest usually says something good, and then you're the VIP. But since it's Halloween, and I think you know where I'm going with this, this is a beautiful thing. We miss Coach Leach in the Big 12.
I mean, I completely hate candy corn. When I was a kid, gummy bears. Let's see, gummy bears for sure.
Sour or regular?
The Haribo. It's got to be the Haribo ones. And then the other thing I like is when they used to have the sprees in a box. Outstanding. You have to go to the dollar store to find it, but I do. And then the latest, there's still candy innovation, although a while back I found that Europe had better candy than we did overall because they have gummy everything. And then, they have those Nerds clusters, which is new.
With the gummy.
Yeah, which is good. The Nerds clusters is good. And then if you go chocolate, probably Almond Joy.
Love it. Hopefully you'll get some of that next week.
Yeah, we'll see.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thank you.
Oh my God! I saw that clip too. How do you not love the guy, man? Oh my Lord!
Unbelievable. That right there. One of my friends, you may remember him. I can't remember if he's older than you. Billy Shershot, the kicker for Longhorns in the early 70s. He and Leach are best friends.
Are they really? Yeah. They got Texas A&M earlier this year. Got him at Kyle Field. He's always had kind of success against A&M. I don't know his record, but I think it's pretty good. So I remember when they went through the coaching search post Bryles and Jim Grove, the interim, and they were talking about some coaches. And I said, just for the fun of it, I want him. I was joking. And a lot of people, oh my God, no. Just to hear him, just to hear those, I used to be able to watch Bill Parcells at Cowboys press conferences, and you kind of like sitting in your uncle's lap. He always gave you some, like when you're like 5 years old and he'd give you a quarter, or your granddad. He always had something that just made the way. I think maybe his accent. Every time I listened to him, I learned something. And I know he was, egotistical, but a hell of a football coach. But I used to always love listening to Bill Parcells. And normally now I could care less about most of these press conferences because you could pick them up and pick and choose. You mentioned Halloween. Wouldn't you love for us to be able to go back in America where kids could go trick or treat and not be worried about things that they get or worried about walking the streets at night? Wouldn't you love things to go back to where it just seemed like we were all on the same page? And I'm not going to get into all that. I just wish, you and I kind of talked about this before you started rolling. I wish we'd all listen rather than yell. And I don't know if this is what you wanted me to say.
No.
You brought up Halloween. I used to be able to go. Again, I used to do a lot of things because I'm older. And so when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, that doesn't mean there weren't bad things out there. I used to be able to go to any house anywhere, whatever blocks, and have a brown paper sack or whatever they gave me, get dressed up, act like a silly little kid, like dressed up as Casper the Friendly Ghost or Superman or whoever. And it was so much, it's innocent. And then I'll never forget it. I don't know, this is, I got 2 children, and they went trick-or-treating, and we'd take them to certain places. Then you started driving them to certain neighborhoods. And then you hear about the first time that somebody had like a razor blade in a candy bar. I was like, what the hell? And I hate that, man. I hate you can't have kids go run around and go play football or baseball in the corner. And I know that's not good. That's kind of bringing up bad, but I just wish we could get back to that. Don't you?
I do too. And it's progressively gotten worse. I think it's mental health, and it's this world where we make things for certain people feel much worse than they really are.
Yeah, I saw a quote the other day. Would you tell somebody something that you would want them to tell you? If you don't think you'd like it, then don't say it to somebody else. And that doesn't mean that I don't lose. I lose my mind. I'm a competitive person. I sometimes am not easy to work with or for, but yeah, I mean, we're just all so angry, and there's a lot of things going on. And I think sometimes I think too many people use that as an excuse to act that way. Man, we got to survive. We've been through a lot. And I just wish that, I think that is something good. Let's go back. Good. You see now message boards, which I work for one. And I know that UT's got theirs. And I know that OU's got theirs. And it's part of a business, and it's a thriving business because fans want to vent and they want to know inside information, and they'll pay extra money per month to get like level 2, 3, 5 or premium, and it's great. But it's social media. What did Charlie Strong say about that?
It's a downfall of society.
I think he's got a good point. Charlie Strong's a pretty smart man. I know he didn't win football games at Texas, but it's like you're either with me or you're against me, and I want us all to be. There are times like on a talk show. Sometimes I'd start getting like, and then I'd stop. This guy's listening to our show, which means he respects us or likes what we're giving them or showing or whatever we're doing. Why am I going to argue with him? And I find myself getting into that on Twitter. Start arguing. If someone's following me and I want to like bicker at them. Why? I mean, like, why? Who are we now? Oh, sorry about that.
No, you've really removed the steam saying some things that I wanted to say, and you're speaking for me. I think as we enter these last 2 months of the year, 3 months, quarter 4, whatever you want to call it, business terms, Q4. Look how my new language.
Yep, absolutely.
Man, let's get over the COVID. I know it exists, but I'm with Smoak. Man, let's put it behind us. Let's accept people who think differently than us. That's okay. It's okay. And let sports bring us together.
You know what? Sports is sometimes people listen to talk shows or watch your podcast or watch what we do or whatever, watch games to get away from all the other stuff that is so negative out there. And now we're letting it kind of creep into sports.
That's a good point.
We're letting it creep into what used to be our outlet. I want to be able to sit there and watch a game without being told how I should think or about all these. Oh, I better stop right there.
That's offensive, Dave.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But, I used to go trick-or-treating. I didn't know who I was going up to whatever front door. I would go get whatever it was. It was never, ever, ever an issue. We'd go back home, my 2 older brothers, my younger brother, my sister. We'd sit on the floor, unload this massive thing of candy, which was always keeping dentist people open. But we would sit there and look and pick and choose, and we never had to worry about something. God, we're lucky. And we thought we had problems. We're lucky as hell back when I was growing up.
We were very lucky when we grew up, and that, I think, is what we need to end on, because I'm grateful for the era we grew up. But I'm grateful, despite the picture that we see painted ahead of us because of politics, Hey, man, I don't care what color you are, what religion you are, if you root for the Aggies, if you root for Sam Houston or OU, I love you. I love you because you love sports and you're passionate like David Smoak and I. Man, let's just make a world a better place.
We'll try to do it.
Let's do it.
Love you, Sean. Love
you,
you, man.
brother.
Now, I don't know about that Sam Houston thing, though. I don't know about that. We might have to. I'm kidding. I was so happy for them to win the national championship.
Oh, that was cool.
That was cool for the conference. It was cool for Texas as well.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
You tell your son I said hello. So
I will.
Greg Smoak, the David Smoak, go visit Smoaky, SMOAKY.com. Check out his show on his YouTube channel with Catalina and his son for all of them, because he's representing all three of them on episode 98 for Big Mike, Coach Mo, and Hardball Hards from Killeen, Texas. We out.
You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up.